and the members of Lakeland Public Television. Thank you. Closed captioning for Lakeland Currents is supported by the Minnesota Department of Commerce, Telecommunications Access Minnesota, and Nisswa Tax Service. Nisswa Tax Service, tax preparation for businesses and individuals. Across from City Hall in Nisswa and online at nisswatax.com.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear that? I don't hear anything either. And that's what our program is about tonight. Silent power. You can't hear it, but it's there. I'd like to introduce my guest this evening, Todd Headlee, who is the CEO of Silent Power, and John Frederick, who is the Senior Vice President for Marketing and Sales. Is that correct?
That's right.
Welcome to our show. And before we get into what Silent Power is, what it is that you do, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourselves, and maybe, Todd, we could start with you.
Sure. I'm a native of the Brainerd Lakes area. I've spent over the last decade working in the community here. Worked at Hunt Technologies. Watched that company grow and help them move it on. To their new owner, Landis and Gear, and then joined Silent Power and kind of helped them kind of get off the ground about 4 years ago.
And are you an engineer?
I'm an engineer by training. And, still kind of dabble in various kind of engineering related.
You never
things.
lose that once
No,
you're an engineer, right?
It's in my blood.
And John, how about your background?
I'm an engineer as well, and an Iowa native, but moved to Minnesota after engineering school, and worked for a company that produces generators, Onan. Early in my career, moved to company ADC, which became a Fortune 500 company, and then I joined Silent Power about 3.5 years ago.
And we might add that Silent Power is located in Baxter, and you have roughly how many employees?
About 16
and how many of those would be in the engineering area?
Yeah, I'd say well over half. There's about 10 engineering-related positions.
And in your appliance that you market, it's a worldwide market, it looks to me like.
Yes. Yep.
And just briefly, maybe talk about this for a minute. Your kind of business is one of the kinds of businesses that was being promised money by the change of administration in 2008. There was a lot of investments in solar companies. Obviously, some of those didn't pan out,
right.
Got some real negative responses. But to do the kinds of things that you're doing, it takes some investment before there's a lot of return on that investment, obviously. Is it getting harder to come by? Is that investment money getting harder to come by?
Yeah, I mean, these types of industries take lots of dollars to launch, versus kind of a typical business. And, that's why, in certain cases the government has stepped in, to help. But, clean tech, the sector we're focused in, the VC community has been very strong in that area. And we've been fortunate enough, to get new investors, in my 4 years there. And, clean tech in general has been one of the strongest investment areas in the country, outside of the government.
And I know one of the challenges in electricity, and we're all pretty much dependent on electricity, is there's a pretty big loss from the transmission to the end use, and there's also huge issues of storage. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to store power when the lights go out, when a storm hits, and you're saying, well, we can do that, can't we?
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what sort of started this. How did you get involved in this sort of thing?
The company was really focused on a little different product when I joined, on fuel cell technology, kind of a different form of storage using hydrogen. I saw a great opportunity with the emerging battery technology that's becoming available. With the electric vehicles today, like the Nissan Leaf, for example, the battery technology is becoming very cheap enough to build an electric car, for example. Well, those same batteries are very applicable in this application. Literally putting a battery system in someone's home that the utility can control, turn on and off at strategic times of the day, to help them succeed in their business. Utilities are really constrained these days in being able to add new capacity to their system. Adding a coal plant, for example, is very difficult. With the EPA and other state regulations, very difficult environment. So utilities are doing these pilots to investigate what other types of technology can they put out in the field to really delay some of this new generation. And storage at many of these utilities is one of the key pilot areas. I'd say the top 50 utilities in the country all have very large pilots going on with all types of storage. Small storage like we're doing, kind of with our device, and bigger bulk storage that you'd see at a substation. So it's a real emerging field. Some people kind of call it a $0 trillion industry, meaning it's very small right now, predicted to be very large in the next 5 to 8 years.
We're pretty well locked into generating most of our energy, and at least electricity, through coal and the nuclear plants that exist today. I think with the Japanese crises that happened over there, it seems like that's just about to put a complete stop to developing nuclear energy. Has it? Or is that
it has, absolutely. And those ramifications will be felt for the next decade. And there will be more renewable, just no matter who's in charge, politically, there still will be more renewable. 35 states have a renewable portfolio standard. That is not going away. So the amount of renewables going out of the grid is becoming greater, hence the need for more storage to make that volatile resource kind of more reliable.
I know I was in Ontario this last year, and there's a lot of solar panels going up in Ontario, financed in part by the government.
Right.
And not all business people appreciate that necessarily, but that's the investment the government's made. Probably the leader in solar technology would be Germany, I would say, probably. And that's hugely subsidized, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Well, you have an appliance, and tell us what this appliance does.
So you would put this device, and we can kind of walk through a kind of a brief demo if you'd like, but this device would really go in your home, and it would go next to your main service panel, where that might be. In Minnesota, it's common for your main service panel to be in your garage. So you would place this right next to your main service panel. And as you would expect, it's made up of batteries, which you can kind of see on the bottom. Then we have our patented power electronics kind of existing in the upper part of the device. And what's unique about it, other than just storing energy, of course, is the control we give the utility. So imagine, 100 or 1,000 of these out in the field, scattered, amongst a small community. One of them on its own really doesn't have an impact on the grid, but when they're marshaled together, aggregated together, through software and controlled very discreetly by the utility, you create a virtual power plant, and it really has the same benefit of putting a small peaker plant, by aggregating these resources together. So the homeowner really wins because they get a UPS system for their home. If the power goes out, they don't even see their lights flicker. And many utilities have several outages per year. They don't tend to last very long, but it's a nuisance nonetheless. So the homeowner kind of can check that box and kind of have that nuisance taken care of. And the utility wins because they're getting capacity added to their system. They have a resource sitting out in the field that they can charge in the middle of the night when they have excess energy. Wind, for example, the bulk of it is generated at night. 60% of the wind is generated when the grid is flat and nobody needs it. So you can imagine a scenario where utilities will be giving energy for free at night, filling these devices, in people's home, and then turning them on kind of in the afternoon when they really need it. Making the grid more efficient, more usable without adding more capacity.
So would this be moving towards what we consider as smart technology on our grid system?
Yeah, this is a big element of the smart grid. Absolutely.
So we think of it as it coming on when there's an emergency, but you're saying it could be used as a management tool for 24 hours a day?
Yeah, it'd be used day in and day out for a utility to manage their peak demand.
And does this qualify for energy tax credits?
Yeah, if this is part of a solar system, if you were to run the solar panels into our device, which is a real common use of the technology, this entire device is eligible for the 30% investment tax credit. So including the batteries, I think I'll talk about those in a minute, but everything in the device, including the batteries, would get a 30% investment tax credit.
And what does that particular unit weigh?
So we're about 1,000 pounds, right, John, with lead acid batteries?
Yeah, with lead acid and other types of batteries be slightly less.
And what are the new things that you're working on with your unit in your particular company? Are you trying to hone the efficiency of it? Are you trying to make it smaller? What are you doing?
Well, there's a lot of innovation happening in the battery space. There's lithium ion is turning out to be one of the kind of better battery chemistries. Everybody knows what a lead acid battery is, but those tend to wear out, and we have to replace those every 3 to 5 years. So the newer technologies, the ones we're integrating in, are lithium ion, the same batteries you'd have in your vehicle. The benefit of those is they're smaller, they're lighter weight. We can make this package smaller. You can cycle them many more times. You could replace them not every 3 to 5 years, but they could last up to 30 years.
Really?
For application. And there's even use cases where you take the batteries out of the vehicles when they're no longer good for the car, and they're still a good 10 plus years for this device. So
in another car.
There's several utilities really kind of setting up a reclaiming process. I mean, this is still several years away when electric vehicles have been on the road more, but reclaim these used lithium-ion batteries, put them in devices like these, and kind of use them for the utilities purpose.
So if you took a Nissan Leaf or a Chevy Volt, it's basically using the same kind of batteries you're talking about.
Yep.
Because I've often wondered, well, what happens when that car gets pretty well worn out? Is the battery shot then? But it sounds like you're saying they could be good for a lot longer than the car.
Yes, absolutely, yep.
Wow. And what is the weight difference if you were to take lead acid batteries versus this kind of battery, the same size? How much lighter
you could shave
it is?
a couple 100 pounds off.
Off each battery?
No, off the whole device.
Off the unit. Wow. So do you work with power companies?
That's our main mission. John will kind of talk about that. I mean, our whole business model is helping utilities deploy as many of these as they can on their territory. If they have a customer that comes to their door and says, hey, I want to put solar, they said, okay, we'll help you with that, but we want you to do it with this island power device because they benefit from it. We make the solar available later in the day. We shift that energy kind of when the grid needs it. So the utilities are really proponents of this because it makes solar or any type of renewable work for them.
How about if they're not using solar, but they just have a normal energy home and a normal usage? Is there a
reason
reason
for that application too? But I mean, just the business case is the strongest. When you get that 30% investment tax credit that we mentioned earlier, so capturing those customers, that demographic, is really strategic for the utility. We're working with Excel. John will talk about some of our projects here. They're very supportive of this device. We have a large pilot going in Minnesota with a number of co-ops. But then we're working in several other key states in the U.S. Working directly with the utility to get as many of these out there as we can. John, you want to kind of talk about?
Sure, I can highlight that. We're working with about a dozen utilities around the country. One of our first installations was actually out in Sacramento, California, and this actually, you mentioned there was some stimulus money available. This did have some Department of Energy funding. And what's going on in Sacramento is the local utility is we're working with them, and we're really in a solar community of about 400 homes.
So now, is that a home unit that you're looking at there?
That is an actual installation in Sacramento, California, and this is one of the happy homeowners. And this unit was installed last summer, and so they're operational. And these units are actually in 15 homes. And the specific issue that they're trying to address there is that, as Todd mentioned, most utilities actually see their peak daily demand from about 4 to 7. And this particular utility calls it their super peak in the afternoon. And so really the intent here is, because these are all solar homes, is they're storing the excess solar production that is in excess of what the home uses around the noon hour. That's typically when you have the highest solar production. They're storing that in the batteries, and then that energy is released out into the grid when the utility is experiencing that peak demand from 4 to 7. And that's called daily solar shifting is the technical term for that. And so part of what this project is doing is showing how that excess energy can be stored and really released later to help the utility meet peak demand. And utilities have one of the toughest jobs in the world in terms of every second they're trying to balance supply and demand. Mm-hmm. And they could always add more natural gas turbine peakers and other resources
to boost it up,
to hit that peak demand, because they have to build everything for the peak demand. Or what they could do is actually store some of this energy when it's in excess. And in fact, here in the Midwest, at the wholesale energy level, pricing level, energy will actually go negative. They'll actually pay you to take it because so much wind is being produced, and nobody needs the energy.
At night.
At night. So it's really, really the solution we're providing is, store energy when it's excess, release it when it's scarce, and it's really an alternative to building more generation. So that's one of the things that we're testing out in Sacramento.
If I could just interrupt you for a second, and as I understand this would be a real benefit because for a while they were forcing power companies to buy back energy from wind generators or solar,
right.
And they had no way to save it or to use it. It was just basically flooding their market with a place that had no place to go. So this makes it very cost effective, or at least much more cost effective for power companies, doesn't it?
Yes, and actually, Ray, power companies still have to do that. That hasn't ended.
Right.
If you have renewable energy, as Todd stated, 37 states basically have a law that says you will buy it, you will pay the retail rate as a utility, whether you need it or not. And in Minnesota, and what the 37 states also have is a renewable portfolio standard. So even in Minnesota, by the year 2025, by law, utilities must produce 25% of their energy with renewable resources. And so, getting the supply and demand to match, gets even tougher because most renewable energy is intermittent. The wind doesn't blow all the time, and the sun doesn't shine all the time because of cloud cover. And then typically that energy, wind at night, solar in the middle of the day, doesn't really occur when the utility needs it the most. So this really solves a number of issues. And with more and more renewable energy, the Department of Energy, many utilities are very nervous about how they're going to cope with this. And that's why energy storage was actually one of the focuses of some of this stimulus money to try and solve this problem.
So can this go towards their renewable energy if they use a storage unit, or does that not count?
If typically this would be in a lot of our installations. We just talked about Sacramento. This is installed right with the renewable production, in this case solar. And so in that case, that renewable production would count for credit in terms of that renewable portfolio standard.
Well, believe it or not, Ray, California has a storage portfolio standard. I mean,
Really?
They've always been kind of on the forefront of kind of new energy ideas, and that the administration out there passed a mandate to put storage in the field for utilities.
So you have competitors?
Yeah, there will be competitors, and to that point, some very large companies are entering this area. LG, a company that many are aware of, large white goods manufacturer out of Korea, was one of our competitors, and we're actually competing quite well against them. We are the leader in this industry. It's still very small. We've won over a dozen pilots with utilities. These are competitive scenarios, with RFPs, et cetera. And there's been multiple companies applying for them, and just the small company out of Minnesota is really the leader in this area right now.
And I see you've got Tennessee Valley as one of your customers. What are you doing with them?
That's an exciting project as well. And what's really happening there is this is demonstrating basically a solar-powered electric vehicle charging station. So, the other thing utilities are interested in is electric vehicles. It's good because they're going to use electricity instead of fossil fuels to get you around. So that's a plus. They'll sell more electricity. But, the negative is that, when you go home at night and plug that electric vehicle in, from 4 to 7 when they already have a peak, you'd sort of be adding to the problem. So what we're demonstrating there, again, is actually storing solar energy. And then once that's stored, when an electric vehicle comes up and needs to be charged, we'd actually provide that electricity from our batteries.
So it comes off the grid totally?
It comes off of our unit, and so it really doesn't have an impact on the grid. And so we're really demonstrating that with the Tennessee Valley Authority. And
that's a huge co-op.
It is.
That's one of the largest in the country, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
What do you think that battery technology, a little bit of a side here, in automobiles is really going to be the future, or do you see that as an intermittent technology that might not be the solution for all of us?
No, I think there's enough momentum now in this area, enough innovation, enough large companies. I mean, billions of dollars being spent in this area. That will be really the end game. Hydrogen and there'll be some natural gas thrown in different markets, but battery technology has enough momentum to make it happen.
And I think what's holding electric vehicles back a little bit right now is compared to a gasoline powered car, they're still commanding a premium. But one of the things that's happening as predicted is some of this new battery technology for those cars is projected to come down. And so I think that will, over time, be much more competitive with gasoline engine cars. And actually, we're counting on that to make our product lower and lower cost over time as well.
I see you also have a project in Hawaii. What is that? Who gets to go and work on that?
Well, we're still drawing straws on that. But, the issue there is, so first of all, Hawaii is an island, and most of their energy is actually produced by diesel generator sets. And that is a very expensive way to produce electricity. But, they don't have natural gas, they don't have coal plants, they don't have a lot of natural resources. As a result of that, solar energy actually looks pretty favorable when you compare it to producing that with a diesel generator. And as a result of that, there's many areas in Hawaii where over 15% of the energy is actually produced by customer solar panels.
Really?
And that's a very good thing. It does, again, that causes some problems for the utility in that when that's not being consumed locally and fed out onto the grid, it will actually raise the voltage of the grid above acceptable levels. And so, again, what we can do when we're talking to the utilities there as well is instead of putting that electricity on the grid and causing the voltage to increase to an unacceptable level, we'll actually store that. And then, as the sun sets during the night and everybody comes home from work and the consumption's high at the house, again, we'll release that such that, we'll consume more of that energy locally versus causing problems with the utility grid.
If you were a homeowner and you lived in Northeast Brainerd and you had one of these devices and you were using it year-round to sort of spread out your energy usage, and you had this huge blizzard, how long could your home run off of that unit with no help from the outside?
With no help from the outside, we could go a day and a half or so. And actually, if this is coupled with solar, interestingly enough, most solar products actually shut off if there's a grid outage. We actually disconnect from the grid. And so actually, if this was tied to solar, you could potentially run indefinitely that way.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. How about, I see you've got some incentives in California for special storage units, and that you said that they have their own regulation or legislation already that does that. Do you see Minnesota moving in that area at all?
Yeah, we've been fairly active kind of on that front, working with the legislators here. There are incentives for utilities to put demand response technology in people's homes. For example, Minnesota has a rich tradition of controlling people's hot water heaters at night, for example, just charging them at night, not allowing them to charge during the day, cycling air conditioning. It's a real common technique to manage peak demand. So those funds, those dollars that they're really mandated to spend, we got to change so they could direct some of those dollars here. Kind of the economics and the value this brings versus some of those classical techniques are much greater. So that's what will be used to kind of fund some of the technology here in our state. And several states really have similar programs.
So if a company or a homeowner wanted to buy this particular appliance, how do they do that?
So, our vision is, they would walk into a utility and see it there. They sell other appliances. They sell
like your water heaters.
Yeah,
exactly.
They sell those.
So you see that as the outlet,
yeah.
Not at a Home Depot or something necessarily.
I think Home Depot eventually, and whether they see it as their utility or hey, they're thinking about putting solar in, and we're in the process of going out and contacting all of the solar installers in the state and in the nation, such that, hey, they could even have backup with their solar at an affordable cost. So a couple channels there.
Does a person hooking this up need any special training?
So this is like a lot of permanently installed electrical devices, so it should be installed by a licensed electrician. And, in the state of Minnesota, you're required by law to have those types of installations inspected by a state inspector. But, the bottom line is, it probably should be installed by a licensed electrician or maybe a solar installer who would be licensed as well.
Is there anything else you'd like people to know about the unit itself?
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits for the end user. We've talked about the utility quite a bit. Again, for a homeowner, you imagine a scenario where the utility's kind of shutting their air conditioner on and off to control demand. Well, if a fire device is in place, they can run their air conditioner at full speed. We're dispatching the battery energy, so it really minimizes the lifestyle impact of demand response by having storage located in people's homes.
Now, how about if there's some small business or even larger business owners that are interested in getting this product? What would they do right now?
Contact us.
Okay.
This is the perfect solution for the business that would like UPS for some of their critical circuit services that they have in their business. If they're considering solar, again, there's tax credits, accelerated depreciation available for this type of equipment, and we certainly see commercial installations as one of our key markets.
So again, it's Silent Power, and they're located in Baxter, and your website is?
silentpwr.com.
PWR?
PWR.
Sort of abbreviated. And if people have interest in learning more about this, they can go to the website, or they could contact you. I'm sure that there's information on how to contact you off that website.
Absolutely.
And it's very interesting because I think most of us think of generation of power, but not so much of storage of power when we think of our homes and our businesses. So this is really a unique twist. Thank you for being on the show. We're sort of running out of time, but a very, very interesting product, and it's good to see that it's happening right here in Minnesota.
Yeah, thank you, Ray.
Tonight marks our last show of the season. It's time to go fishing. And we will be back in September. Our first couple of shows are going to be on nanotechnology, which I think you will find absolutely fascinating, some very interesting stuff. But before we leave, I'd like to thank Nisswa Tax. They've been an underwriter for our program now for 4 years, and thank you very much to those folks. I'd also like to thank Dave Henschke and his students. They're here tonight running all of our cameras and our board in the back room, and they've done that unselfishly for 4 years, and we appreciate that very much. So you've been watching Lakeland Currents, where we're talking about what you're talking about. I'm Ray Gildow. So long until September.
Programming on Lakeland Public Television is brought to you in part by Coca-Cola Bottling of Bemidji, supporting healthy, educational, recreational, and asset-building opportunities for families in the Northland. Mid-Minnesota Federal Credit Union. We're with you all the way. Mid-Minnesota Federal Credit Union on the web at mmfcu.org. Leech Lake Energy Assistance Program, assisting the families of Hubbard, Cass, Beltrami, and Itasca counties with home heating and utility costs. Information at 1-866-864-8668. And the members of Lakeland Public Television. Thank you. The North Itasca Electric Cooperative encourages you to watch the Lakeland News Update and encourages its members to use all the energy they need, but to be sure they need all the energy they use. North Itasca Electric Cooperative, owned by those it serves. The Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe is pleased to be a sponsor of Lakeland News on